Time now for the big interview of the day, and joining us on Startup Central is Deep Kalra of MakeMyTrip. Mr. Kalra, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining us here. So much to talk to you about. I'm going to begin with the epidemic, coronavirus. Everyone seems to be catching that flu when we talk about the equity markets. Look what's happened to the share price of travel companies. Today is the gaming companies which are hogging the limelight. But this is bad news when it comes to your business. People will obviously not want to go to Hong Kong. They will not want to go to Macau. Singapore is on alert.
Yeah, it's clearly something which is most unneeded. But more than that, it's quite serious. So I think the reality is that most people don't know what this virus is about because it's so new. We've all been hearing this is a novel virus. They don't really know what it's about, so therefore they don't really know how to treat it right now. And it's quite contagious. Clearly, China right now is not a place where people are traveling to. And like you mentioned, some other countries as well. So Hong Kong, Macau, of course, which is right there, but then also places a little further away. I think people are having doubts, should they travel, should they not? And it's not so much about where you're going, it's also about the whole transit, who could be on the plane, could a carrier be on the plane and, obviously unknowingly pass on the virus to you. So I think there are a lot of concerns. We've already seen cancellations from people who were traveling to China. I guess thankfully for us, it's not a very big travel corridor as yet, but it is something we take quite seriously.
But Mr. Kalra, if I could also ask you about other destinations, I was reading about this online when, for example, the American tour companies and all of that, Vietnam, people are scared to go to Vietnam, Cambodia, and even Bhutan. Is that correct? Is that something that you're seeing in India too?
I haven't heard Bhutan yet, to be frank, but I have heard of Vietnam as well. I have heard some people who wanted to either postpone or cancel their travels there. Numbers are small, but I think when people are traveling for discretionary purposes, so basically for holiday or for something which can be put off, then obviously people don't want to go to a place where there could be either a chance of catching the virus or even otherwise quite inconvenient, like, where do you go out? Because the whole idea is to go out and have a good time. And if you're not going to be able to do that, then I think people want to realign their plans. So it is a difficult time for the travel industry. It's not the first time the travel industry has seen other viruses and attacks like this. The SARS epidemic way back in early 2000s, 2002, 2003 was something which was also pretty severe. It was in the early days of MakeMyTrip, so I remember that clearly. And again, that was in the eastern part of the world. Hopefully, science will be able to get a check on this pretty soon.
But for some reason, India has been put as one of the 30 countries on high alert. So even inbound travel, I would imagine, forget outbound travel from India, but inbound travel to India, is that going to be badly impacted, you reckon?
Yeah, I think putting India on a high alert is, I think, being overcautious. No real cases still reported, but the reality is it's so similar to a normal virus or a flu that it's hard to tell what is what. So, and people have obviously been traveling back and forth to China and other places. People have been in contact with folks who have come from China. So I think it's a cautious measure. Our business, as you might know, is largely Indians traveling within India and going out from India. So outbound travel, the inbound part is a very small part of our business. So I don't think we feel that impact, but overall for industry, again, like I started out by saying, it's not something the industry needed at all at this point of time. I think, with the slowdown itself, there were challenges enough. So this one is something which has come at a terrible time, and one can only hope and pray that we are able to get a control of it. The scientists are able to check the virus, and we're able to lock down.
But Mr. Kalra, like you brought up SARS, for example, you have experience on your side. One can never foresee these kind of disruptions. It doesn't just impact your business, but ancillary businesses as well. And you're talking about massive business centers. Forget tourism hotspots as well, but these are business centers, Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, all of that. So when that happens and the ancillary businesses also go down, how long does the recovery usually take? And what do you do in times like this? Do you have to refund the customers? How does it work?
Yeah, I think it's hard to say how long it'll take, to be honest. It's something which clearly very few people might have an idea of right now. I don't, we just hope that it will be, we've got better and better in being able to track down the viruses, figuring them out, and then figuring out how to address them. What's the antidote to them? So I think that's something which I can't really answer. But I think the second part of it, absolutely, there's a lot of cancellations and postponements. I think airlines have already announced that there will be no cancellation charge up to I think mid February for flights going into China and coming back. Some airlines have actually withdrawn flights. Indian carriers do fly into China directly, both Air India and Indigo. They still continue to fly. And let's keep in mind that the epicenter of this is Wuhan and not Shanghai and Beijing, which are quite far away actually. So those flights still continue. Some international carriers have said that they will not, they will, suspend services for a while. So I think that's something which the airlines have to take a call. But as far as we're concerned, we are watching this very, very carefully.
You've not, have you taken a report from your teams? Are you seeing a slew of cancellations? Are the phones ringing non-stop? There are a lot of Indians, for example, that are working in Hong Kong. They do work in China as well, and even Singapore for that matter.
Yeah, no, like I said earlier, we definitely have seen cancellation requests for people traveling to China at this point of time and to Hong Kong. Not all, but some, and the lines have obviously, the call centers have been busier. It's something which I think we are aware on how to tackle, so we do have the ability to take on extra volumes at this point of time, and it's something we're watching with concern.
Mr. Kalra, if I could now move away from the coronavirus and talk about the big event this weekend, Saturday, 1st of February, Union Budget for the first full year to be presented by Nirmala Sitharaman. Tell me, have you been part of the pre-budget consultations? Even if not otherwise, what would be your industry's big request, big wish list from the Finance Minister?
Yeah, I know we're all very excited about the budget, upcoming budget. I have been part of one consultation, a group consultation at PTIO with the PM and other senior ministers. I did present the views of the industry, where we believe that the industry can benefit. What I really believe is that the time has come for tourism to be accorded the importance it deserves. Travel and tourism accounts for no less than 9% of our GDP, probably about 8% of people employed. And it is a force multiplier. I think that's been proven. And in fact, it's one of the few industries which in these trying times has actually shown signs of resilience. So I really believe that priority sector status should be accorded to the travel and tourism industry. It will indeed place it where it needs to be, because this is something which is good for the overall economy. The multiplier effect, the ripple down effect is tremendous, and employability in travel and tourism can be improved. Overall, infrastructure for us on the domestic tourism front, which also caters to inbound tourism, still leaves a lot to be desired. I think most of us are painfully aware that traveling in season to any popular destination, whether it's the hills or it's the beaches, is really not something now that exciting a prospect because of the crowds. And the reality is that most of these destinations tend to get overcrowded. We do not have a concept of carrying capacity, so we don't control the number of people who are getting into that destination at any point of time. And as a consequence, there's a lot of pressure on resources. So there's pressure on basic necessities like water, there's pressure on space, there's pressure on the roads, there are traffic jams in holiday places where, ironically, you're trying to go to get away from the traffic. And then you're faced sometimes with traffic which is worse than the traffic back home in the cities. So I think a lot of that can be fixed. And yeah, there are multiple measures. One would love to make suggestions and hope to see them actually.
In fact, what would those suggestions be, Mr. Kalra? One, you said, a lot of the same tourist hotspots are very crowded. I think it was on 15th of August where Prime Minister Narendra Modi also encouraged Indians to travel a lot more domestically. What are the specific things that can come in the budget to give a fillip to the tourism industry, which is such a big multiplier?
No, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up the clarion call that our Prime Minister made for Indians to travel to 15 new destinations by 2022, so within 3 years. And that's been followed up by the Minister for Tourism, who's actually said that Indians who travel to 15 new places in calendar year 2020 will be reimbursed by the government. And that's a very interesting scheme, definitely a first. We're all very excited about it and trying to figure out how exactly the mechanism will be worked out. But as coming to specific proposals, Nayantara, I believe that something fairly radical can be done to boost the infrastructure requirement of the industry. And I'm linking this to the excess or the surcharge which has been placed recently on high net worth individuals. So the surcharge, as you know, is almost 7 percentage points, which has taken the 37% up to almost 43, 44% effective tax. Obviously, that's hurting anyone in that segment. However, if there were a proposal where we could actually include or further push infrastructure bonds, which are covered under Section 80 CCF, I believe, and allow that surcharge to be instead invested in infrastructure bonds by the same companies, backed by the government, etc., and actually give a 20% kind of benefit there. So as to explain, like you can trade off that 7% surcharge by investing 7 into divided by 0.2, really 7 into 5, 35% of your taxable income into infrastructure bonds. So a large amount can be collected through infrastructure bonds because I think most people would rather invest in infrastructure, in bonds which are interest bearing, and also participate in nation building in an area which is much needed. And I think it would be actually a win-win. It will be great for not only the taxpayer but also for the government. And I think a lot of this could go towards infrastructure, which is the backbone even for the tourism industry. We can have further specific bonds, which are tourism or travel-specific infrastructure bonds, which I think will give a big fillip to the economy. So this is something new which I'm proposing, and I'm hoping that might be looked into. In addition to this, we've been asking for a far clearer and crisp B&B policy, a bed and breakfast policy, because a lot of places in the country don't have hotels but are lovely places to go to. We need a policy not just for tax rationalization, but we need a policy because of safety and security. I think a lot of the growth there is unregulated, which can cause a lot of issues. If there were to be a crisis, and these small places which were meant for probably 8 or 10 people now could have 30 or 40 people staying in the same premises. They are overbuilt. We're waiting for catastrophe there. So I'm hoping that we'll see a clear policy out there as well. On the inbound side, the government's already brought down the visa fees, and electronic visas definitely help. But a lot of other countries which are very keen on inbound tourists, like we should be, have actually experimented with either longer term visas, like the UAE has done recently, keeping in mind their big expo year, or even free visa for a while like Thailand has done. And I think we should look at that. I think the net impact will actually be a positive. So we will lose some money which would come in from visas, but I think we will more than make it up by bigger numbers that will come in.
Those are very interesting ideas that you've given in, and I like the bond one, how you can ride on that, plus of course for setting up hotels and all of that. But Mr. Kalra, in the year that's going to be finishing, this financial year, it's being seen as one of the worst ones in recent times for the economy, for consumption at large. Have you guys suffered from that? Because discretionary spending would obviously come down, discretionary travel would come down, and therefore you would want some fillip in the budget, right?
Yeah, and that's something which is not sector specific. I think overall there's a demand issue, and everyone is expecting. There have been hints already which have come that there might be a bring down of the tax brackets. that's something we're expecting overall. As you would know, that travel and tourism is either done for leisure purpose or done for business purpose. In both cases, there's a high dependency on discretionary income. So leisure purpose, there's a direct connection with discretionary income. So definitely putting more money back in the hands of taxpayers will definitely help. Even a cutback or a complete doing away with long-term capital gains will give a fillip not just to the stock market, but we've seen a direct correlation with more people traveling or people spending more on their leisure travel when the stock market does well. So we definitely think that will be a big boost. And overall, even if companies do better, then corporate travel obviously does better. So there's no question that that is a very fundamental ask, which I think everyone has, not just travel and tourism, but all industry and indeed all taxpayers.
Mr. Kalra, I know you have to go, so I'll make this my final question. I was going to wrap up, except I just saw a news alert that has come in. It's a statement that, in fact, has come in from Indigo, which is suspending flights on the Delhi-Chengdu as well as the Bengaluru-Hong Kong routes. It's suspending it from 1st of February to 20th of February. We were just talking about this. So obviously, the problem is getting far worse. Indigo, India's largest airline, now deciding to, for example, even suspend flights to Hong Kong.
Yeah, I think the airlines, like I said, they've got to take a call on this. Running an airline, there's a very fixed cost business, and every time a flight takes off from one point to another, particularly if it's international, you burn a lot of fuel. And if you're not going to get a certain number of seats filled up, then it's going to be a loss-making proposition. So I think I'm not surprised. British Airways had announced something similar earlier today. Flights from London into China. So I think it's something which is, you can understand if there's demand is falling off at an alarming rate, and you really have no idea of cancellations or short bookings, then I think that's something which airlines might have to do.
And with that, Mr. Kalra, I'd like to thank you for joining us, being so candid. Here's an open invitation to join us after 1st of February to decode Nirmala Sitharaman's budget.
Thank you, Nayantara. All the best.